It was exactly 3 a.m. when I woke up. Again, no alarm, no noise, nothing unusual. Just that same invisible pull that had been dragging me out of bed for the past 3 nights. Something sacred about that hour. It wasn't just insomnia. I knew God was trying to say something. The air in my room felt different, like heaven was brushing against the walls, and the atmosphere was thick with something I couldn't name but could definitely feel. I sat up in bed, heart beating a little faster than normal, and I whispered into the darkness, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." That's what the old prophets used to say, right? I didn't feel much like a prophet, but I was ready to hear whatever God had to say. The moment the words left my lips, I felt it. An unmistakable presence. Not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. This was weight. Holy weight. The kind that makes you want to drop to your knees and weep. Not because you're scared, but because something pure and ancient just stepped into the room. Something. Or someone. That's when I saw the light. It didn't come from the window or the ceiling lamp. It just appeared in the center of my room, pulsing like the heartbeat of heaven. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. My skin broke out in goosebumps, and my spirit seemed to recognize something my mind couldn't yet process. Then, from within the light, a figure emerged. Tall, radiant, eyes like galaxies, wings that shimmered like polished bronze in firelight. "Fear not," the figure said, his voice like the sound of rushing waters mixed with wind chimes. Gentle, but undeniable. "I am Michael, Archangel of the Lord. I have been sent to you with a message, one that has been written in heaven long before you were born." Now look, I know how that sounds. Angels, visions, secret messages at 3 a.m. It sounds insane. But when it happens to you, when your soul feels like it's staring at eternity in the face, there's no room left for doubt. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't hallucinating. This was real. Michael stepped closer, but the space between us didn't feel threatening. It felt safe, sacred, like every lie I had ever believed about being unloved, unwanted, or forgotten evaporated just by standing near him. There was a holiness in the air that unraveled me in the best possible way. "I have guarded you," he continued, "through every storm, every heartbreak, every detour. Heaven has heard your prayers, even the ones you stopped praying because you thought they'd never be answered." Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them. He wasn't wrong. There were things I had buried, questions I had dared not ask anymore, dreams I had laid to rest because life made them seem foolish. Then he said something that nearly made me forget how to breathe. "There is someone," he said, "chosen, hidden, watching from afar, sent by God to love you, pray for you, and walk with you in divine purpose. You have sensed their presence in spirit. You've felt their prayers in your loneliest hours. They know your name, and heaven knows theirs." I blinked hard. Was I hearing him right? Michael continued, "This is not mere attraction or human affection. This is covenant. This person has been assigned to your life, not by chance, but by prophecy, and the time is drawing near for their name to be revealed." I didn't know what to say. My lips parted, but no words came out. I was overwhelmed by hope, by fear, by the terrifying beauty of it all. "The Father has seen your longing," Michael said, "and he has kept their name sealed until now. But soon, your spirit will recognize them. You will not just see their face. You will feel the confirmation in your bones." The room grew even brighter. My eyes squinted against the light, but my soul leaned forward like a thirsty traveler finding a hidden spring in the desert. I wanted to know more. I needed to know more. And then he said it. "I will return," Michael whispered. "When your heart is ready, when your faith can carry the weight of this revelation. Until then, listen, watch, and pray. Their name will come to you, not from lips but from the Spirit." The light began to recede. His wings folded. The weight lifted, but something deep inside me had shifted. I knew I had just crossed a threshold. Nothing about my life would ever be the same. As the room dimmed back to its usual shadows, I sat there, still on the edge of my bed, trembling. Not from fear, but from awe. The kind of awe that only comes when heaven interrupts your reality. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't even have the name, but I had a promise, and that was more than enough. I knew I had been marked by something divine. And whoever that person was, whoever God had chosen to be the one watching me from afar, the countdown had begun. The days that followed that midnight encounter were anything but normal. Every moment felt charged. I'd wake up in the middle of conversations because my spirit was elsewhere, locked on that vision, that light, that voice. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had begun, something irreversible. There was no turning back. Heaven had dropped a seed into my soul, and whether I was ready or not, it had started to grow. I tried to tell a friend about what happened, but the words just sounded small. How do you explain an encounter with an archangel without sounding like you've totally lost your mind? So I stopped trying. This wasn't something to be explained, it was something to be discerned. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just a message. It was a call. Every time I prayed, it felt like someone was listening with me. Not just God, but this other presence, the one Michael had mentioned. Whoever they were, I could feel their prayers reaching across whatever distance separated us. There were moments I'd feel a wave of peace wash over me out of nowhere. Times I'd be about to spiral into doubt or anxiety, and a strange calm would take over, like someone had placed a hand on my shoulder in the spirit. Michael's words echoed over and over in my mind. They know your name, and heaven knows theirs. That line wrecked me. How could someone I'd never met be carrying me in their prayers? How could a stranger know the shape of my soul? And then, just like he promised, Michael came back. It wasn't like the first time. Not quite. There was no dramatic burst of light, no shaking air. It was gentler, quieter, but no less powerful. I was sitting on my living room floor, late into the night, just worshiping with soft music playing, when I felt it again. That holy weight, that sense that I was no longer alone. I looked up and he was there. Not like a ghost, but solid, radiant. His wings spread wide behind him, flickering like fire but cool to the touch. There was something different this time. He wasn't just glowing, he was burning, not consuming, not dangerous. Holy fire. It radiated off him, and within that fire, I could see glimpses of faces, cities, even events. Like his very being contained realms of divine intelligence. He carried stories in his flame. "Do not be afraid," Michael said, his voice softer, this time, almost fatherly. "The Lord has remembered you, and he is revealing mysteries, not to confuse you, but to prepare you." He moved his hand, and something like a scroll appeared in midair, rolling open on its own. Words written in a language I couldn't read danced across it, glowing gold and white. "This," he said, "is the record of covenant, of prayers exchanged in secret, of promises made by the Spirit, of the one who has been standing in the gap for you." I leaned in, my eyes trying to make sense of the symbols. They shimmered, alive almost, like they weren't just ink but light frozen in time. I couldn't read the words, but somehow my heart understood them, like God was bypassing my intellect and speaking straight to my soul. "This one," Michael continued, "has been set apart. They have prayed for you when you didn't have the strength to pray for yourself. They've cried for you, fasted for you, carried your name into battle. You think you've been alone, but you've never walked alone." I felt a lump rise in my throat. The thought that someone I didn't even know had been spiritually fighting for me was overwhelming. I had felt so abandoned in certain seasons, forgotten, even by God. But now I realized someone had been holding the line, interceding for my survival. Michael stepped aside, and the scroll zoomed closer until one part of it was front and center. A single line glowed brighter than the rest, and then, Slowly, letters began to form in English. They were shaky at first, like they were being written in real time. I held my breath, but just before the full name appeared, the letters stopped. Michael looked at me with a hint of a smile. "You're not ready yet," he said. Frustration flared, for a moment. Not ready? What else was there to do? I'd been obedient. I'd prayed. I'd waited. But he knew my thoughts. "This isn't about earning," he said gently. "It's about alignment, timing. When your spirit and theirs are both in sync with heaven, the full name will be released. Until then, you must continue preparing your heart. Watch for the signs. Their name will begin to show up in unexpected places, not to tease you, but to awaken you." He turned back to the scroll and whispered something I couldn't hear. The writing faded and the scroll disappeared in a soft burst of light. Then he stepped forward and placed a hand over my chest. I gasped, not because it hurt, but because it burned with truth. "I seal this moment in your spirit," Michael said. "So when doubt comes, and it will, you'll remember what heaven has spoken, and you'll hold fast to the promise even when you can't yet see the fulfillment." And just like that, he vanished again. I sat there for a long time, stunned, overwhelmed, wrecked. My heart was beating like a drum, my mind trying to catch up with what my spirit had just experienced. I still didn't know their name, but I was closer than before. And this time, I was paying attention. The days blurred after that second encounter. My body walked through routine, but my spirit lingered somewhere between earth and heaven. I couldn't focus on small talk, couldn't concentrate on shallow things. Something had been branded into me, a holy anticipation. Every moment carried the weight of, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the moment something else is revealed. Maybe I'll hear the name. Maybe I'll feel their presence again. I started journaling everything. Dreams, passing thoughts, names I heard, things I saw twice in the same day. I didn't want to miss anything. It felt like heaven was layering hints into the everyday, like divine breadcrumbs being dropped through time. Then came the dream. I had just drifted off to sleep, still clutching my Bible to my chest, when I found myself standing in a vast field. There were no buildings, no trees, just tall golden grass that shimmered like waves under a setting sun. It was quiet, sacred, the kind of quiet that hushes your soul. I looked around, and in the distance, I saw it. The scroll. It wasn't floating, this time. It was resting on a stone pedestal, unguarded but radiating majesty. I felt drawn to it like my entire being was being magnetized toward that one object. Each step I took through the grass sent chills up my spine. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to touch it, but something inside me whispered, "You were meant to." I reached the pedestal. The scroll unrolled by itself, as if it had been expecting me. Inside, the letters weren't glowing this time. They were ink, rich, dark, and ancient. Written in a language I'd never learned but somehow understood. And the moment I laid my hand on the parchment, I felt everything. I felt the ache of years I thought were wasted. The ache of wanting to be chosen, not just noticed, but deeply, intentionally chosen. I felt the quiet prayers whispered into pillows soaked with tears. I felt the heartbreaks, the betrayals, the moments I almost gave up on love entirely. And alongside that, I felt their side too. I felt their waiting, their patience, their longing, their own questions whispered to God in the quiet. I felt how they wrestled with the same fears. What if I'm imagining it? What if this connection is only in my head? What if they never recognize me? The scroll carried both of us. It carried our pain, our prayers, and the quiet promise God had been whispering to each of us in secret. There, in the center of the scroll, was a symbol I couldn't decode. It wasn't a name, but it was alive, a shape burning with silent significance. I tried to trace it with my finger, but the moment I touched it, the dream began to shift. The pedestal vanished, the scroll faded, and I was left standing in the field, But this time, I wasn't alone. A figure stood in the distance facing away from me. I couldn't see their face, couldn't even tell if they were male or female. But my soul knew them, like it had been waiting for this moment since before I was born. Like I had been missing a piece of myself, and there they stood, whole, breathing, real. I called out, but no sound left my mouth. I tried to run toward them, but the ground beneath me turned into water. Not to drown me, but to slow me, to teach me something in the waiting. Then the voice came again, not from the figure this time, but from behind me. "Michael, this dream," he said, "is not fantasy. It is prophecy. This is not imagination. It is memory, planted in your spirit before time, now being awakened by God's appointed season." I turned to face him. He wasn't fiery this time. No flames, no thunder, just presence, calm, strong, like a warrior who didn't need to prove his power. It was understood. "Do not chase them," Michael continued. "Do not search by flesh. The one who is meant for you will be revealed by the Spirit. You will not have to guess, strive, or beg for confirmation. God will make it plain." I turned back, but the figure was gone. Just a breeze now stirring the grass where they once stood. My chest ached with both disappointment and peace. "When the time comes," Michael said, "the scroll will open fully, and the symbol will become a name. And when you hear it, it will not just be a name. It will be a sound your spirit already knows." Suddenly I woke up gasping, my hands were trembling. I looked down and my Bible had fallen open on my lap. My eyes landed on Song of Solomon 3:4. "I found the one my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go." I broke down right there, weeping, not from sadness, but from something deeper. I was mourning the version of me who had settled for less. The version of me who thought God didn't care about this part of my heart. Because now I knew he did. He cared enough to send an angel. He cared enough to write our story on a scroll in heaven. And he cared enough to keep it sealed until my heart was ready to read it. I started noticing things after that dream, things I'd normally ignore. Names repeated in random places. A lyric in a song that hit me too deeply. A stranger's passing comment that seemed oddly specific. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't me grasping for meaning where there wasn't any. It was alignment. I could feel God drawing connections between heaven's scroll and my earthly steps. One morning, while walking through the park near my apartment, I felt that presence again. No flash of wings or blinding light. Just the unmistakable quiet thunder of heaven drawing near. The leaves rustled louder than usual. A wind brushed against my skin, warm and deliberate, like someone invisible was walking beside me. I stopped, and there, in the middle of the path, was a white feather. Not a pigeon feather, not one you'd find from any bird around here. It was radiant, thick, clean, carried no dust, no wear. I knelt down to pick it up, and the moment my fingers touched it, I felt something surge through me. A flash of light behind my eyes. A phrase written across my spirit like lightning. "They're closer than you think." I didn't hear it out loud, but my soul did. Clear as crystal. That same still, fierce voice that marked every heavenly moment since the first night Michael appeared. I stood there holding that feather like it was a piece of a greater puzzle, and somehow I knew I had just walked into another chapter of the scroll. When I got home, I laid it on my nightstand and opened my journal. The pen moved before I had time to think. Words poured out like they'd been waiting behind a dam that finally cracked. Their name isn't hidden from heaven. It's hidden from your doubt. Every delay is a preparation. Every silence is a sanctification. You are being aligned, not just to meet them, but to recognize them. And when you do, your spirit will testify before your mouth ever speaks. I couldn't stop writing. The Spirit had taken over. Paragraph after paragraph, my hand just followed the current. And when it stopped, I was shaking, weeping. A holy heaviness covered me like a blanket, not a burden, a presence. I knew the angel had been there, maybe still was. The more I pressed in, the more signs began to surface. A name that kept showing up in books, podcasts, even in dream fragments. A specific city mentioned over and over again. A song I'd never heard before playing 3 times in 1 week in 3 different places. Each piece felt like a small knock from heaven. Gentle but intentional. Almost playful. Like God was smiling while he orchestrated this sacred suspense. But with the signs came the warfare. The enemy doesn't just stand by while heaven releases destiny. No. He interrupts, mimics, distracts. The days that followed were strange. I found myself pulled toward people I'd never considered before. Old crushes resurfaced. Strangers came out of nowhere showing interest. Even dreams of past relationships started popping up. It was like the enemy was trying to reroute the signal, confuse the radar, get me to settle right before the promise. I fell into a pit one night, not literally, but spiritually. I started questioning everything. What if I misheard? What if I imagined it all? What if this scroll was just a coping mechanism for loneliness? I curled up on my couch, holding my Bible, and whispered through tears, "God, am I making this up?" No vision came, no angel appeared, but something better happened. A peace flooded me so fast and full it took my breath away. My chest stopped heaving, my hands stopped shaking. I could hear my own heartbeat slow, and within that stillness came a whisper, gentle, warm, wrapped in eternal certainty. "Do you really think I would bring you this far to leave you now?" I sobbed. It wasn't a dramatic encounter, but it was real. That voice, the one I've learned to know from childhood, it never lies. It doesn't hype, it doesn't flatter, it just is, steady, like the tide. And I knew then, I hadn't imagined anything. Heaven had initiated this. Michael hadn't come because I begged for it. He came because God sent him. This wasn't my fantasy, it was my calling. The next morning, I received a message. A simple text from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. We weren't close. Barely. Acquaintances. But the message stopped me cold. "Hey, I had a dream about you last night. There was a man standing behind you in armor. He had wings, and he kept saying, 'Don't let her give up. Tell her she's almost there.'" I don't know what that means, but I felt like I had to tell you. I nearly dropped the phone. No one knew about Michael. No one. I hadn't told a soul, not even my closest friends. Yet here it was. Confirmation. The name still hadn't come, but now I didn't need to rush it. The one heaven was revealing wasn't just someone to love me. They were someone appointed to my assignment. Someone my spirit had known before I had language to ask for it. And whether they were a day away or a year out didn't matter anymore. I wasn't chasing a person. I was walking in promise. Everything shifted after that message. Not in some grand cinematic way, but subtly, like dawn sneaking up after a long night. A deeper trust began to settle in my bones. I wasn't grasping anymore. I wasn't begging. I was waiting, but with authority, not desperation. There's a difference between passive waiting and prophetic waiting. Passive waiting is silent, defeated. You wait because you have no choice. But prophetic waiting, that's charged with fire. You wait because you know something is coming. You wait because heaven is holding the curtains, ready to unveil what's been prepared in secret. That was the kind of waiting I'd stepped into. I fasted for 3 days. No food, no phone, no noise. Just me, God, and the Word. I lit a candle. In the evenings, not out of ritual, but as a symbol. A reminder that the flame still burns. That something holy was still unfolding. It was on the 3rd night that it happened. I had just finished reading Isaiah 62, a chapter I felt drawn to but didn't fully understand until then. "You will be called by a new name that the mouth of the Lord will bestow. No longer will they call you deserted, but you will be called Hephzibah, for the Lord delights in you." The words pulsed like a heartbeat through the page. And then the flame moved, the candle, small, contained, suddenly flared, It didn't spark or flicker. It rose, almost doubled in height. No windows were open, no draft in the room. And I swear to you, I heard it speak. Not audibly, not in English, but in spirit. A name I had never thought of. A name that hadn't crossed my mind, hadn't been on any of my lists, hadn't meant anything to me until that moment, and it didn't come like a lightning bolt. It came like a whisper that had been echoing through time, finally reaching my ears. I froze. I didn't write it down at first. I was afraid I'd taint it, that my own mind would try to attach it to someone I already knew. So I just sat there, heart pounding, eyes locked on the flame. And I said the name in my heart once softly. That was when Michael appeared again. This time, it wasn't in a dream. I was awake. The air in the room changed, thickened. The candle dimmed for a second, then grew steady again. And then he was there, standing, behind me, not in full visible form but cloaked in power. The kind of presence you don't question. You just know. He spoke in spirit again, not loud but deep, timeless. You have heard correctly. The name is sealed to your spirit. Do not speak it aloud until it is confirmed. The one who bears it is marked by heaven's hand. My body trembled. I don't know if it was fear or reverence or both. I wanted to ask him so much. How will I know? When will it happen? Will they know too? But none of those questions left my lips. Instead, I just said, "Am I ready?" Michael didn't answer right away. He walked over to the window, or at least I sensed him moving there. The wind outside picked up. The trees stirred, and then he said, "Your heart has been prepared, but the oil must continue to flow. Stay filled, stay hidden. When the appointed time comes, heaven will unveil what it has kept in shadow." He was gone after that. Not dramatically, just gone. The candle flickered once and returned to normal. The room felt empty, yet soaked with glory. I stayed there for hours, not praying, not asking, just existing in the afterglow. And the name? It stayed with me. I didn't chase it. Didn't go looking through contacts or past conversations trying to match it. I knew better. This wasn't a game of guessing. This was a matter of divine timing. The kind of thing that can't be rushed without wounding the promise. But here's what changed. I started seeing them differently, whoever they were. Before, the idea of this person was abstract, vague, a hope, a concept. But after that night, they became real. Not just a future partner, but a person whose soul was already tied to mine through an invisible thread. Someone walking around with pieces of the same scroll etched into their spirit. I began to pray for them differently. Not just, "God, bring them soon," but, "God, strengthen their hands. Guard their eyes from counterfeits. Speak to their heart like you spoke to mine. Keep them burning, even in silence." The more I prayed, the more peace flooded in. This wasn't a rescue mission. This wasn't about finding someone to complete me. This was a partnership that heaven had authored long before I knew I needed it, and I realized then, the secret admirer wasn't just someone who had feelings for me. They were someone who had been assigned to love me through calling. Someone who would not be intimidated by the oil I carried, but would recognize it, honor it, even protect it. Their love wouldn't come to distract me. It would align me, and when I finally hear that name out loud, when they speak it to me in conversation not knowing I've heard it before, my spirit will rise like that candle flame, and I will know. This is the one the scroll was written for. After that night, I moved differently, not because I was trying to be ready or attract anyone. No, something had shifted inside me, deep in my spirit. I walked through life with the awareness that I was being watched, not in a paranoid sense, but spiritually, intentionally. Heaven watches over every scroll, especially ones this sacred and not just heaven. Sometimes people do too. I began noticing this one person. They'd been around for a while. Quiet, unassuming. Someone I'd never really paid attention to before. Not because they weren't kind or present, but because I wasn't looking. I had boxed them out mentally, assuming they didn't fit the mold I'd always imagined, but something changed. At first it was subtle. They'd walk into a room and my spirit would stir. Not butterflies, not nerves. Something deeper, a kind of spiritual gravity. Like the air tilted slightly in their direction. I'd overhear their name in random conversations. Then I'd see it in emails, books, articles, places that had nothing to do with them. The same name Michael had whispered in the flame. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't chase. I didn't test. I just watched and listened. Heaven has a way of speaking when we stay silent. They started showing up more often. Not in a creepy way, just naturally. Coincidences that began stacking too high to be accidental. Shared events, mutual friends, conversations that drifted our way like leaves caught in the same wind. But the wildest part? They saw me. Not like others did. Not just surface-level attention or polite acknowledgement. They looked at me like they were reading something ancient behind my eyes, like they recognized something, even if they didn't know why. And still I said nothing. I didn't want to project, didn't want to make assumptions or read into things that weren't there. I'd seen too many people fall in love with the idea of someone, rather than their God-ordained reality. I wasn't going to let infatuation distort divine clarity, so I prayed. Every night I laid the name before the Lord like an offering. If this is the one, I whispered, confirm it again, not with emotion, but with alignment. And God began answering, not through lightning bolts or loud voices, but in character and consistency and spiritual resonance. Every time this person spoke, something in me listened, not just with ears, but with calling. Their words weren't just kind, they were weighty. They carried oil. Their presence didn't excite me, it anchored me. Still, I waited, because the scroll didn't say, move now. It said, watch. Then something strange happened. One day we crossed paths at a small gathering. Nothing major. Just a few people talking in a corner, laughter drifting through the room like music. And right in the middle of a story, they looked at me and said something so casual, so unexpected, I nearly forgot how to breathe. I don't know why, but I've been praying for you lately. Your name keeps coming up in my spirit. I hope that's not weird. I blinked. I wanted to respond. To scream even. To pull out my journal and flip to the night the candle flared. To shout, I know your name. Heaven told me about you before. I even noticed you. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled and simply said, thank you. That means more than you know. Because it did. I didn't need to rush. Didn't need to spell it all out. God was already orchestrating the unfolding. And sometimes the most powerful confirmation isn't a prophetic word. It's someone praying for you when you didn't ask them to. Later that week, Michael returned again. This time, not in vision, not in dream, but in the quietest way yet. Was sitting on my bed reading Psalms. The wind outside was still. No music, no candles, just the word and my heartbeat. And suddenly I felt him. The same pressure. The same holy stillness. I didn't need to ask what he was doing there. He spoke in spirit, few words, but enough to make my soul thrum. It is not your job to reveal what heaven is still preparing. Wait. When the name is spoken in truth, your spirit will testify and they will know too. Tears welled up in my eyes. All this time I thought I was the only one receiving the signs, the only one walking this quiet road of divine secrecy. But what if they were too? What if somewhere in their prayers, heaven had whispered my name just like it whispered theirs to me? What if the admirer wasn't just watching from a distance, but preparing up close? It's a humbling thing to realize you've been loved in silence, not pursued recklessly, not flirted with in the flesh, but covered in spirit, honored in prayer, guarded in intercession. That's not infatuation, that's assignment-level love. And suddenly, I wasn't waiting anymore. I was partnering with heaven, with timing, with someone who might not fully know yet, but who was, being drawn just the same, not by charm, not by games, but by the sound of heaven pulling two scrolls into alignment. And when the name is finally spoken out loud, when they say it, not knowing that I've heard it, whispered before, I'll smile not out of surprise, but because my spirit will have already said, I knew it was you. The days that followed were laced with signs, not loud, showy ones, but holy echoes, repeated moments, confirmations, the kind of divine patterns you only notice when you've been walking with God long enough to know that nothing is ever truly random. It started small. I'd hear the same scripture 3 times in 1 week, from different sources, different voices, all unconnected. Then the same phrase would pop up in a podcast, a sermon, and then again in my own prayer time. Appointed time. Every time I heard it, something stirred, like the sound of keys turning in a lock, like the rumble before a door opens that's been shut for years. Then came the dreams, not every night, just once in a while. But when they came, they hit deep. One dream showed a scroll being opened in the heavens, my name glowing on it, and another name written directly beneath mine. The 2 names touched, joined by a golden thread that ran through both, glowing at the point of contact. Another dream showed me walking through a vineyard. The vines were wild and heavy with grapes, but no one else was there, until this person appeared beside me carrying a lantern. They didn't say anything, they just walked with me. Same pace, same path, same purpose. That was the key. It wasn't just about someone who noticed me. It wasn't about attraction, admiration, or even spiritual chemistry. It was about alignment of calling. Because when God writes your love story, He doesn't just send you a person, He sends you a partner. Someone who doesn't compete with your purpose but helps complete your assignment. Someone who doesn't just fall in love with you, but falls in step with what God has written for you both. And the more I prayed, the more I saw it. This was never about me finding them. This was about us recognizing each other at the right moment. That's when Michael visited again, not in a thunderous blaze, not with drawn sword or lightning bolts, but in the middle of an ordinary moment on a walk through the woods near my home. I hadn't been thinking about the secret admirer. I was praying for clarity about my next steps in ministry, wondering how to balance this divine stirring in my heart with the pace of my current season. Then the air shifted, just like before. Birds hushed, the breeze paused, and there was that stillness again, that holy wait. He spoke clearly this time, not in riddles, not in shadows. You are not waiting to be chosen. You were already chosen. The scrolls were written with your names entwined. This is not about pursuit, it is about permission. And when it is given, it will not come with confusion. My breath caught in my chest. So many of us think love is about earning, about striving, about being good enough to finally get noticed. But when heaven writes the story, it's not about proving, it's about timing. It's not about forcing, it's about flow. Michael paused for a moment, and then he said something I'll never forget. Many are praying for the one, but few are preparing to become the one. Do not idolize the revelation and forget the refinement. That pierced me, because even though I'd been walking in obedience, I knew there were areas I still hadn't surrendered. Expectations I was gripping too tightly, fears I hadn't truly laid down. And heaven wouldn't release a connection this sacred if I wasn't ready to carry it well. So I began the deeper work, not for them, not to impress, but because if God was trusting me with someone who had been hidden, covered, and marked by divine assignment, then I needed to carry their heart like a priest, not a performer. And here's what I learned. When God calls you to love someone He has anointed, you can't afford to love casually. You must love consecrated, with intention, with intercession, with protection, not just emotionally but spiritually. That's what Michael was preparing me for. Not just the moment of revelation, but the mantle that would follow. Because the name wasn't just a clue, it was a calling. And the person who carried it wasn't just someone I'd fall in love with. They were someone I would fight beside. Someone whose life would be entwined with mine in kingdom battles. Someone I'd cover in prayer before I ever kissed their forehead. Someone I'd walk with into holy ground. So I prayed differently, deeper, more targeted. I asked God to prune anything in me that would dishonor the gift, to burn away my impatience, my assumptions, even my romantic fantasies, because this wasn't about writing a fairy tale. This was about living a prophecy. And just when I thought I had stepped into the deepest place of preparation, something else happened. A letter. Not handwritten, not romantic, but personal, thoughtful, from them. They said they'd been thinking about our conversations, that something about the way I spoke stirred something in them they hadn't felt in years, that I carried a presence that made them want to get closer to God again, that every time we crossed paths, something inside them settled. They didn't mention love, didn't confess feelings, but I didn't need them to, because I heard the echo. It was the same sound I'd heard in the flame, the same sound that pulsed through Michael's voice when he said, "They are marked." Heaven was drawing us in, one confirmation at a time. The admirer wasn't hiding anymore. They were approaching, slowly, quietly, respectfully. Not pushing doors open, but knocking gently, waiting for heaven to say, "Now." And I could feel how the permission was coming. The moment I read that letter, something inside me settled. Not because it was overly romantic or filled with declarations, but because it was real, pure, intentional, and above all, it was safe. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a secret admirer. This was someone heaven had been guarding. Not just from harm, but from the wrong timing, the wrong crowd, and even the wrong version of me. See, there are parts of you that can only emerge in the presence of the one God designed for you. Not because you were incomplete before, but because some parts of you were reserved, like seeds waiting on the right soil. And this person's presence? It was that soil. I began noticing how easy the conversations became. Not shallow small talk, but deep water discussions. Things of the spirit, burdens we carried, dreams that scared us because they were too big to say out loud unless God breathed on them. And every time we spoke, I felt heaven lean in, like the angels were eavesdropping with permission. One day, as we talked about purpose and calling, they paused mid-sentence. Their voice softened. "I don't know why," they said slowly, "but I feel like we've done this before, like this connection didn't just start here." I stared at them, my heart pounding, because that was it. The divine echo, the one Michael spoke of when he said, "When the name is spoken in truth, your spirit will testify," and mine did. Every part of me knew. I wasn't meeting this person for the first time. I was recognizing them. Spirit to spirit, scroll to scroll. It wasn't chemistry. It was covenant memory. The unveiling had begun. Not all at once, but in waves. Holy, gentle, and unmistakable. And as it did, I remembered something Michael had said in one of our earliest encounters. When the time comes, there will be no striving. Just peace. Peace is your proof. That peace was everywhere now, even in the uncertainty, even in the waiting. I didn't need them to declare anything overnight. I didn't need to rush into labels or force a narrative. I was finally content just being in alignment. Because when something is truly divine, the pressure lifts. You don't manipulate it. You honor it. And that's exactly what they did. They never flirted recklessly, never tested emotional boundaries, or played spiritual games. They carried our connection with respect, the kind that made me feel like I wasn't just being pursued, I was being protected. That's rare, and it made me realize the most powerful kind of admirer doesn't chase you for attention. They intercede for you in secret. They don't show up loud. They show up true. That's what Michael meant when he said their name would leave me speechless. Not because it would be shocking, but because it would come wrapped in the kind of Holy clarity that silences doubt. And yet the enemy didn't take this unfolding quietly. In the weeks that followed, distractions came out of nowhere. Old connections resurfaced, random compliments, unexpected invitations, all designed to stir confusion, to pull my eyes away from the very thing heaven was highlighting. But I stayed anchored, because once heaven reveals the real thing, your appetite for counterfeits dies, permanently. That's when I had one last dream, different from the others. This time I was standing at an altar. No guests, no music, just me, God, and the presence of someone I couldn't yet see. Then a hand reached out. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even visible beyond the wrist. But as I touched it, I felt the scroll open, not physically, but spiritually. Like a curtain parting in the heavenly realm. I heard the words echo loud in the dream. This is the one who has prayed for you in places you never knew. The one who knew your name before they knew it. The one who didn't just admire you, they warred for you. I woke up sobbing. Because in a world full of people who crave attention, how rare is it to be fought for in the unseen? And now here we were, standing in a delicate space between revelation and realization. No declarations had been made, no bold confessions. But the evidence was undeniable. I saw it in the way they asked about my spiritual life, in the way they remembered tiny details I hadn't even thought were significant, in the way their presence brought clarity, not chaos, and most of all, in the way they looked at me with quiet recognition, like they were just waiting for heaven to give the final green light. I remember the last time we spoke that week. As we said goodbye, they hesitated, just for a moment, and said softly, "Whatever God is doing, I just want you to know I'm not here by accident." Neither was I. This wasn't chance. It wasn't coincidence. It was a name revealed by heaven, and soon it would be spoken aloud on earth. At last, the moment that had been simmering beneath the surface was close. The name, the very name Michael revealed in the flame, the name carried in dreams and whispered in prayers, was about to be spoken. Not by me alone, but by the one who had kept it hidden until everything aligned perfectly. I'd learned by now that divine timing is nothing like earthly timing. It's slower, yes, but it's also more sure, more sacred. You don't just get a window, you get a doorway. And you don't just hear a hint, you get a roar that shakes your soul awake. The week leading up to that day was heavy with expectation. I found myself wrestling with questions that had nothing to do with love or romance, but everything to do with destiny. What did it really mean to be chosen? To be known so deeply and yet held with such reverence? How do you protect a sacred connection when the world demands exposure and speed? Then came the phone call. It was late evening, the kind of hour when the world quiets down and only the heart speaks loudest. I heard the voice on the other end before they even said my name. A voice familiar, yet somehow deeper, steadier. "I've been praying for this moment," they said, voice steady but raw with feeling. "I want you to know something. I'm not the person I was when we first met. God has been changing me, preparing me for this, for you." My heart raced but didn't panic, because the Holy Spirit whispered, "This is the one." Then, finally, they said it, the name that would leave me speechless. My name spoken back to me with love and reverence followed by their own. It wasn't just a name. It was a promise, a covenant, a sacred recognition that had survived seasons of silence, spiritual battles, and divine waiting. For a moment, we just held the silence between us, allowing the weight of the revelation to settle. Then they said, "I've carried your name in my prayers longer than I can remember. You've been in my heart like a secret song, waiting for the right time to be sung out loud." Tears came freely, because in that moment, everything made sense. The visions, the dreams, the flame, the quiet presence, the waiting. This was not just a secret admirer. This was a divine appointment. 2 scrolls written before time finally unfolding in flesh. But the story didn't end with the name. Because naming is only the beginning. What followed was the beginning of a journey, not one of fairy tale perfection, but of holy partnership. A path filled with prayers, shared battles, and sacred trust. Michael reminded me once more, guard this name, protect this gift, because what heaven has joined in secret, the enemy will try to steal in the open. And so, with the name spoken, I understood the real work was just beginning. Now that the name has been spoken, the divine secret unveiled, the journey takes on a new dimension. It's no longer about mystery or waiting. It's about walking forward with eyes wide open, hearts surrendered and spirits aligned. Michael's words echoed in my heart. What heaven has joined in secret, the enemy will try to steal in the open. That truth became my shield and my call to vigilance. Because spiritual connections of this magnitude don't just withstand the storms, they grow stronger in them. The days that followed were filled with intentional steps. No rushing, no pressure, but steady, sacred momentum. Every conversation, every meeting, every prayer became a thread weaving us closer into the tapestry God was creating. I learned quickly that divine love is both fierce and gentle. Fierce in its protection, gentle in its patience. It doesn't demand control, but invites cooperation with the Spirit. Together, we started to dismantle old wounds, ours and each other's. We brought broken places into the light, healed by grace, sealed by prayer. And in that process, I discovered something profound. This love wasn't about fixing or completing. It was about reflecting. Two imperfect souls reflecting God's perfect image, chosen to walk out a shared destiny. Michael showed me that this revelation wasn't just personal, it was prophetic. Our union was a signpost, a testimony to God's power to bring what was hidden into the open, to restore what was lost, and to write new stories from old scars. We weren't just partners, we were warriors, intercessors, and bearers of a divine legacy. And yes, the enemy tried to sow confusion. Doubts crept in, distractions tried to pull us apart, but every attack was met with prayer, with faith, with an unshakable confidence that God's hand was on this story. Now, I'm living proof that when Archangel Michael reveals a secret admirer, it's not just about romance. It's about destiny. It's about a love so deep and so deliberate that it leaves you speechless, not just because of the name, but because of the life it brings forth. So if you're waiting on your own divine revelation, remember this. God is writing your love story, too, one that will surpass your wildest dreams because it's written by the author of all things. Trust the timing, prepare your heart, and when the name is revealed, receive it with the awe and reverence it deserves. Because this is just the beginning.